Hey everybody, welcome back. Today is Friday, June 19th. I'm taking you up the mountains to the cabin. We are doing a work trip and I thought you guys might like to see the views on the trip up here. And since this trip will take us a couple minutes, so I figured I'd do a couple stories along the way too. As you can see, I have the trailer hooked up. I think you can see it fairly decently there. I have a log splitter on here because if you remember from the first video I did up here, and I believe it's probably the only one I've done up here so far, we had two pine trees taken down, and we were up here a couple weeks ago, and we had cut some of them up into about, firewood length. And so I got the log splitter on the trailer, and we're going to split that up, use it for campfire wood, and I'll take some back to the farm because the rental property, it's a vacation rental property that my parents own. They'll sell a little bit to the renters that come in. So I'll take some of that back because we're not going to use it all up here anyway. But anywho, I got a companion too. This is my little boy Jax. He's one of the three dogs I had myself when me and the better half got together. And he's coming along for this trip. Anywho, one story I'm gonna go up here is my dad, and actually my uncles have told me this too. I'm trying to think. This has to be back in the early 80s, maybe late 70s. I can't remember. It's whenever they had the Honda Civics. I don't exactly know, but anyway. My dad told me the story a couple times, and my uncles have too. And it depends on who tells it to you. It depends on the facts of it. But anyway, every year, basically, the cabin's closed down during the wintertime for the most part because these roads are not plowed. And the only way getting up in here is like either a snowmobile, which I do not know for a fact if you can still do that, or horseback riding. I know you can horseback up in here. But anywho, it was April. It was opening day, or it was like the weekend opening for trout season, and there had been a lot of snow that fell down up here. I mean, that give you a pretty good idea. One year we came up here, there was 4 or 5 inches at the bottom, and there was 1.5 to 2 feet up here. So it kind of gives you a good image of difference here. So, but anyway, my uncles, which are from my dad's side, came up with their parents from, I want to say it's like the King of Prussia area of Pennsylvania, which is kind of close, kind of in the vicinity roughly of Philadelphia, but a bit, I would say, northwest. But either way, it's a couple hour drive up here. And they had, well, my dad said 4-wheel drive trucks and stuff like that, but my uncle said, I don't think they said they had 4-wheel drive vehicles, but either way. And my dad, now I'm 6'7", and I did get my height from my dad, and yeah, I'd say, so obviously he was pretty tall. Him, my Uncle Paul, and my grandfather all rode up in this little Honda Civic. And if that isn't funny enough, someone that tall riding around in one of them, they came up here with that, and the other guys came up, like I said, with their other vehicles. Now, up here ways, when we get to that point, I will show you. The road has been rerouted right now due to flooding out that happened a few years ago. And so we're going to go the way that my dad, my Uncle Paul, and my grandfather went. But if we were to keep going straight past where I turn up here, that's how they went up, and that's actually the quickest way to go. Now, they, with their trucks and whatever other vehicles they had coming up here, they got stuck coming up. And if I remember correctly, my Uncle John said it took them like somewhere like 6+ hours to get to the cabin. And I don't know if that's counting the travel from King of Prussia up here, or if that's just battling this road alone. Now, Dad and Opa and Uncle Paul got up in here, and they got to Horseshoe Bend. As far as Horseshoe Bend, which we will come up on that, and I will point that out when we get there. And that's about as far as they could go. Or I don't know if it was as far as they could go, or if it was as far as they were willing to go. Now, I know it's like a 2-mile hike from Horseshoe Bend to the cabin from there, because Horseshoe Bend was washed out, and it just got fixed almost a year ago here soon. It's like a year ago in August. And so they walked from there to the cabin, saw that nobody else was there, went back to the car, and they slept in the car that night. And I'm sorry, but that's still comical thinking about the three of them hurtled up in that thing. Anyway, from my Uncle John and my Uncle Dave's side, some of them walked from where they were stuck to the cabin that night too, saw that their footprints were there and no one was there. And I don't know what the difference in time from when they got there to when Dad, Opa, and my Uncle Paul got there. But next morning, after everybody finally got up there, Opa, Uncle Paul, and Dad woke up, and they literally drove the rest of the way in that Honda Civic. Not plowed, nothing. And when they got there, they just couldn't help but laugh, because that's just hysterical. Now, I've never owned a car, period. I've always owned pickup trucks, but that's impressive for a small car. And you know they don't have much weight to them, but that's a story that I've always found really interesting, and it never gets boring every time I hear it, because it still gets told even to this day. But so there's that. Up here is actually where I started hunting. I've always had the interest, but my dad, he did hunt when he was younger, but he never really got much into it. My Uncle Paul and my Opa, on the other hand, they're big hunters. Well, Opa was when he was alive. Uncle Paul still is to this day. And even though Dad he didn't hunt any time when us kids came about, not to my knowledge anyway. But I always had the interest. I knew Opa did, I knew Uncle Paul did, but I also know everybody that came up here, which were 4 of my uncles, which technically I call them my uncles, but they would be my second cousin. But that's a whole another ordeal. They're more like uncles to me, but there's a story behind that. But anyway, I always got the interest in wanting to hunt. And one year, my Uncle John came. he knew I was interested in it, and he said he would take me and my brother, brought us up here, go out with them, see if we like it, and that way we know for sure if it's something we really want to do. I already knew I was going to take it without a hitch. So my brother, he says he'd like to, but I don't know 100%. But quick interruption in the story. This is the CCC camp, which during the winter time, when there's not much of farm-wise going on, I'm going to do some history videos about up here. But I just thought I'd show you that. Anyway, so that's where the original way to go up there is, but it's washed out. Anyway, my uncle came up one Thanksgiving, and at this point he was living in Delaware. Yeah, I believe it was in Delaware. And came up, got me and my brother, brought us up, and we went out with him. I enjoyed it. You know, I was like, the whole time I was just itching to wanting to do it myself, but Matt, I think he, at that point, my brother, when he went out, I don't think he really had the patience to be that kind of, to be into it too much. Maybe that's changed now, I don't know, but so a couple years later, I didn't actually get my hunting license until, what was it, that year after I graduated. I went out, I found out where they had the hunter safety course, and I went and did it. My cousin, who was, you know, me and him were like the best of friends, brothers, the whole 9 yards, which he's no longer here either, but he went with me both times too, and that's when I started hunting. Now, I was coming up here before I started hunting too. My grandfather, or no, my great-grandfather is actually one of the original people that built this cabin. And so obviously he was here throughout the rest of his life. My grandfather did come here as well, but he actually did build a cabin of his own. I'm going to say about an hour and a half east of here. And he was living down in Downingtown area. Downingtown, King of Prussia, kind of the same area for the most part. But, so he would come up, he built this cabin of his own too, and he always went over there for hunting. But, so then after that, and my Uncle Paul has been here, and my dad, for hunting as well, because I've actually seen pictures of it. Because if I didn't see pictures, I never would have thought my dad came up here for hunting, but I have seen the pictures, so I can vouch for that. But anyway, there's actually an overlook out that way. There's actually a couple of them out here, and there'll be different videos as well. But anyway, I'd come up here for work trips and help with upkeep of the cabin, because I always loved it up here. It's nice and remote. There is no cell phone service. And we got, like I said in the previous video, we get our power from a generator, and water comes out of a creek right next to it, which is the county line. So if they say you can't be in two places at one time, well, you stand across that creek, one foot's in one county and one's in the next. But I just always loved coming up here, and I have a lot of vivid memories that I can remember. Now, my memory isn't always the best due to a head injury when I was younger, but there are some stuff that I can remember pretty well, which is a good thing. But yeah, there's a lot of good memories up here. Me and my cousin that I told you about prior, who passed away, we actually used to go walking through the woods up here, and just for fun. We were kids, push over dead trees. Yes, we did get a couple sticks that came down and got us, but nothing ever too awful big. But we just love being up here. It's so nice and quiet. There's a nice pond. I'm going to be going off to the left here because the road wise, but keep going straight. There's Bear Wallow Pond out there, which I'll get that in another video also. But seeing some of the pictures from up here, it's amazing. And one of the interesting things too, up here during the peak of the lumbering industries from like the early 1900s, and I'm probably going to venture to go ahead and say the late 1800s as well, all of up here was logged off. And there is an old lumber town not too far from here called Maston, and that is going to be a video in itself because there's a lot of history there, and there's actually actually all the I think most if not all camps up here are somehow related to the logging industry of that era. But I will cover that in wintertime videos because even though I work in the cold, yeah, I don't like being out in some of the wintertime temperatures that we get sometimes. But I'm going to cover a lot of that stuff because I actually find it really interesting about the lumbering history up here. And I actually did meet someone where I work. I don't know if he's still there anymore or not. I know he went to, I believe it was one of the other portions of the plant to work, but I don't know if he's still there or not. Where he actually grew up either in Maston or right around when it was big time lumber town. And like I said, I will cover all that in other videos in case there's any people who enjoy history and stuff of that nature. We were actually walking around in Maston there a while back and kind of looking around. But anywho, it's a little bit more background to this area, and it's really interesting. We actually have some stuff on the mantle of above the wood stove that were found up here from the railroads that were up here. And we are actually, if I remember correctly, I think majority of the roads here were old railroad beds, and there are some areas where you can still see old railroad beds as well too, like coming on in the Maston for a good example. There's where a railroad still is, big time. We were kind of walking around there. Now, if you're familiar with railroads, which I'm pretty sure everybody is, the railroad ties, the wood, yeah, the big pieces of wood there. There are still some of them laying along the one section of the railroad bed up there. Now, we didn't walk the whole thing. We were kind of staying in that area, and we actually found pieces of coal, quite a bit of coal, right in that area that we're kind of looking around, and some other metal artifacts from an area we believe was a house. I'll actually cover even some more stuff that's been found down there too. Actually, after the big washouts down here, we found a lot in that town, which I will cover that in them later videos. It kind of, that way I have something to do during the cold months. But yeah, right now we're in the middle of thousands of acres of state forest, and like I said, I grew up hunting out here, and seen plenty of wildlife. I did take my first deer up here which was a 7-pointer. So I think that'll be enough jaw jacking for the time being. Once we get to the Horseshoe Bend, then I'll kind of show you where I was talking about, where my dad, Opa, and Uncle Paul got to, and where they camped out that night. So I hope you enjoy the view. Thing too, for all of us to come up here, that's our form of communication right there, CB radio. And actually the last time we did a small work trip up here, we were actually testing how far we can get. Now if anybody's familiar with these kind of radios, you know, you got your regular CBs, you also got ham radios, but you can actually beef these radios up so you can get out farther. Well, me and my Uncle John have more of the big boy radio, so to speak, and I left before him and my Uncle Dave, and we tested it back at that CCC camp where I told you was at. I picked him up, he was at the cabin, and I got him down there, probably another half mile past there before I lost him. And that's quite a bit of distance for up in here. Now I do not have an amplifier on that radio. It does put out quite a bit of power as it is, but I do not have an amplifier. And I do not believe he does either. But that's kind of your only form of communication up here, because in the fall time, when the leaves are dead off the trees, if you get in the right spots, you can get cell phone service up here. But it's one of those things where you got to be at the right place at the right time, and try not to move an inch once you find it, except for in some areas. But like I said, you got to find it. So, but it's just really nice up here. I could retire out here if I could. But unfortunately, you can't live in your cabin full-time up here. We actually have a 99-year lease. I do not know when that is up. But okay, right here. This is Horseshoe Bend. Now this whole bridge was completely washed out from about this point clear over, completely gone. And like I said, they just got it done last August. So now we're finally have vehicle access. And up until that point, how did we get to the cabin aside from walking? Well, this is this is redneck fashion in the best possible form. My Uncle John brought up a Husqvarna lawn tractor, no mowing deck, just a tractor, up, and to make it even more redneck-ified, in a minivan, nonetheless. I still have it, a small 4x8 trailer with plywood on the floor, and we brought them over, dropped them down over the washout, which is, I want to say it was probably at least 10 feet drop or better. What we did is we hooked a chain to the tow hooks of my truck, hooked them to them, and just slowly eased them down over, and then got them across, because it really wasn't that bad once you got over, across the creek. It was actually almost fairly level over there, so getting them across that wasn't too bad. Just the big rocks were the problem. And we kept it at the cabin, and that's how we got to the cabin back and forth. We'd have to walk in when we first come up to get it, because we'd keep them at the cabin under a tarp, and we did have permission from the forest rangers to have it up here. They did grant ATV usage to people, but because we're the only cabin on this particular road, only we could be on this road. They could not ride their ATVs out here. Which made it nice, because my uncles are, you know, they're up there in age, and my one has arthritis real bad. He can't do the walk like me and my Uncle John can and my cousin John can. So, and believe me, we were happy when we were able to finally start driving up here, because we're going on 2016, I think, is when it happened, or when they washed out. So you figure 3 years. Now, I did still continue to walk in here for hunting season every year religiously, so that somebody was always here. And actually, they are rerouting Mill Creek, the original road up here. And this is actually the first time I'm seeing this, so you guys are seeing this for the first time with me. That's where it's going to start coming up. Can't really get a very good view, but we're coming to the end of this journey anyway. So, for those of you on my channel that hunt, drop a comment down below. How did you get started hunting? And you know, who got you into it? Where did you always have the interest? Do you hunt for trophy? Do you hunt for meat? Or do you do both? It'd be kind of neat to kind of get to know some of you guys a little bit more too. My main purpose is meat, but if I get obviously something that's worth hanging on the wall, I better believe I will. But yeah, drop a comment about that. Do you guys have cabins that you go to, kind of like I do? Or do you just hunt your own property? It'd be kind of nice to see what other fellow hunters have to say about their experiences and everything like that. So, this road is actually in a lot better shape. When this was not traveled by vehicles, this was grass, almost a lawn. The branches were growing out over. It was a deserted road pretty much for the most part, but now we're in good shape. They still got some road work that needs to be done, but they got this fixed a lot. It is a heck of a lot better than what it was. So, but anyway, we're pulling up to the cabin. It's just right over there, so I will leave you guys with that. And I am going to go ahead and get back in, and I will catch you guys on the next one.